All right, let's talk about Nvidia. You know, their earnings calls have become these massive market-moving events. And today, we're going to break down their latest one, which honestly was less about last quarter's numbers and way more about their vision for a whole new industrial revolution.
And right out of the gate, CEO Jensen Huang went straight for the elephant in the room. This whole AI bubble thing. Is it real? And he basically spent the next hour making the case that no, what we're seeing isn't just hype, it's a fundamental rewiring of the entire global economy.
So to really get what he's arguing, we've broken this down into 5 key parts. First, we'll cover what he calls the 3 great shifts that are driving everything. Then, we'll look at the absolutely wild demand they're seeing. After that, we'll get into the tough questions the analysts were asking. Then we'll cover Nvidia's 5-point defense of its dominance, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with the big takeaway for anyone watching this company.
Okay, let's dive right in, because this is really the foundation of Nvidia's whole argument. Jensen's point is that we're not just in one tech transition. He says, for the first time in forever, we're in the middle of 3 huge shifts all happening at the same time. And the reason why is that Moore's law, that old rule about computing power doubling every 2 years, it's finally run out of steam.
So what are the 3 shifts? Number 1 is the move from general-purpose CPUs to accelerated GPU computing. Number 2, the jump from classic machine learning to full-on generative AI, which is completely changing the internet's business model. And third, what he calls Agentic AI. Just think of AIs that don't just find information, but can actually reason, plan, and then do things. But here's the real kicker. Nvidia is positioning its single architecture as the core engine for all 3 of these massive shifts at once.
All right, so that's the grand vision. But how does it actually translate into dollars and cents? Well, the demand picture Nvidia painted was just staggering, and it all kicked off with a really direct question from a top analyst.
The analyst from Morgan Stanley basically asked, hey, are you guys still on track for that mind-blowing forecast you made for your new chips, Blackwell and Rubin? We're talking about a number that works out to something like $350 billion in revenue over just the next year or so.
And Jensen's answer was not just a confident yes, but he went even further, confirming a run rate that gets him to $500 billion through 2026. And then he started hinting at even more upside, pointing to brand new deals with customers like Saudi Arabia and bringing a huge AI player, Anthropic, onto their platform. The message couldn't be clearer. The demand pipeline is overflowing.
But hey, it wasn't all just a victory lap. The second half of the call got really interesting as analysts started pushing back on the real-world limits to all this growth. They started asking the big, hard questions.
The first big question from Cantor Fitzgerald was really a physical one. I mean, with demand going through the roof like this, can Nvidia and its massive supply chain, everyone from TSMC to all the memory partners, can they actually build these incredibly complex systems fast enough, or are they just going to be supply constrained forever?
Then an analyst from UBS kind of zoomed out and asked, okay, so what's the single biggest thing holding you back? Is it power? Just getting enough electricity to run all these new AI factories? Is it the money, finding the trillions of dollars to finance this whole build-out? Or is it something else in the supply chain? This really gets to the heart of the problem. They're building an entirely new industry from scratch.
And finally, Bernstein Research went right for the bottom line, profitability. They pointed out that the cost for key parts, like high-bandwidth memory, are going up. So can Nvidia really keep its incredible gross margins in the mid-70s? That's a huge question for anyone investing in the company. So how did Jensen Huang respond to all these tough, valid questions? Well, he laid out what he sees as Nvidia's 5-point competitive moat, basically the 5 big advantages that lock in their market-leading position. Okay, here they are. 1, they have that single architecture for all 3 of those great shifts we talked about earlier. 2, they're great at every single part of the AI process. 3, they're the only platform that can run every major AI model out there, from OpenAI to Anthropic to Google's Gemini. 4, they're literally everywhere, every cloud, every data center. And 5, and this one is huge, they have what's called unmatched offtake. All that means is they have this massive, diverse line of customers, cloud giants, startups, you name it, all ready and waiting to buy every single chip they can possibly make. So let's bring it all home. What does this all mean if you're trying to figure out the Nvidia story? How do you balance this incredibly optimistic vision with some of these really serious, real-world challenges?
And of course, just a quick and very important reminder, this is just our breakdown of the earnings call narrative. It's for your information only, and it is definitely not financial advice.
So you've really got two sides to this story. On the one hand, you have the bull case. Nvidia is the essential engine for 3 computing revolutions happening at once. They have a locked-in architecture, and they're super efficient. But on the other hand, the headwinds are huge. We're talking about physical limits like power and land, pressure on their profit margins from rising costs, and just the insane amount of money needed to build out this new world.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. Nvidia is clearly building the factories for this new AI age, and they're doing it at an incredible speed. But the fundamental question coming out of this call isn't just about Nvidia anymore. It's about whether the rest of the world, the power grids, the supply chains, the very infrastructure of our economy can possibly move fast enough to keep up.